Hello everyone, I'm Gravity, and I'm here to show my Sabine Yellow deck that has been giving me a lot of good results in tournaments lately, since the start from set 2. So first I'd like to give an overview of the deck in this video, and maybe I'll do more videos about it later, showing like some matchups, maybe some gameplay videos, talking about some of the cards that some of the cards that you might want to include or that I excluded from this build but are worth considering. But yeah, for now I'd like to just talk about the deck list. So let's start with the ground units. We have first R2D2. It's a good early drop, like it has good stats to keep something on the board. It's very hard to kill a 1/4 currently. And it has also a filtering effect that can help you get to your finishers in the late game. Then we have Spec for Soldier. This card is here to stop decks that try to disrupt our gameplay by running a lot of Sentinels. So this can give us a turn where we can just ignore the Sentinel and attack for a lot of damage. Then we have L337. I'm still testing with this card, but it is basically a 2-mana 2/2 with shield most of the time. It also has a niche effect to rescue captured cards, and also a smuggle effect that you almost never get enough time to use. But I really think like having a shielded unit helps us to have presence in the board. The only thing that I really don't like about him is that it's not a rebel, so it loses on a lot of synergy that we have in this deck. Next we have Leia. I'm thinking of bumping this card to 3, but I run it at 2 currently because I think it's not really useful in some matchups, mainly control. It's mostly useful in aggro mirrors and tempo and against tempo decks. When played, you basically play this as a one cost 2/2, which is good if you want to swarm. Or we can exhaust a unit, which can help us basically heal some amount of damage or stop a good attack ability from triggering. It has a lot of versatile applications. This is why I like her in the deck, but maybe not at 3. Then we have Sabine. Uh, this is basically our main ground unit that we have in the early game. It is really good to fight against stuff like Crafty Smuggler or L337, but mainly we run it because it's technically a 2-mana 3/3, which is the best stats we have for a 2-mana unit in the game right now. Next we have Cassian. It's also here mainly for the stats because it's a 3-cost 3/5, which is like the premier stats for a 3-cost currently in the game. It also has a smuggle ability that I thought it wouldn't come up that often, but it actually does. For 5 resources, you basically play him as a ground Millennium Falcon, which can help if your opponent is playing a raw Millennium Falcon by playing Sentinels in the space. And so this card becomes a lot very useful in matchups, especially against slower decks, where we can extract as much value from this card as possible. Next we have Fleet Lieutenant. This is basically a way to buff our units and attack for more damage. So I consider this card as mainly another version of Surprise Strike. It just costs a bit more, but give us a body on the field, so it's better if we use it early in the game as compared to a Surprise Strike that leaves us with nothing, with no board presence after using it. But yeah, it's a really good card. The only thing is that it only applies to rebels, so not every unit you have is a rebel right now. But yeah, it's still a good card to play, especially with sneak attack. I'll get into that later. Another card that is really good with sneak attack is K2 Assault. It's a 4/4 overwhelm. When defeated, you either deal 3 damage to your opponent, which is what you will be doing most of the time, or in some cases where your opponent like has 1 or 2 cards in hand, mostly when they have 1 and you're afraid that they might have some impactful card, then you can opt for the discard off of the K2. But most of the time, this is here to give us a bit of board presence, really good against control, and really good when you use it with sneak attack. Then we have Cartel Coat. It's basically 1 mana 2/3 in space, which is really good. Space units in general, we run a lot of them because most of the decks right now in the meta are currently focusing on the ground to because ground units are usually better than space units. So our main strategy is trying to play in space because there will be less good cards that will be able to interact with our board. So we can just keep pushing damage every turn as much as possible. And then we finish the game with cards like For Call, Surprise Strike, Lieutenant, stuff that just buffs our units and let us deal more damage. So Cartel Turncoat is really good to keep our space presence, to keep a wide board in space. And it has decent stats, but yeah, overall it's like a really undercosted card for what it does, and the bounty isn't that relevant most of the time. Then we have Alliance X-Wing. It's like a worse version of the other card, which is Green Squadron Waving. This is also a 2 mana 3/3. This is a 2 mana 2/3. Both are rebels, but like this card is so good, and we really need that presence in space that we're willing to run a worse version of the card just because it is that good. So opening one of these in space, especially against decks that don't have ECL, usually will help us establish a good presence and require some form of interaction from our opponent so that they can stabilize the board. Then we have what I think is the best card in the deck, Millennium Falcon. It's a 3 mana 3/4 in space, which is extremely overstated. It enters play ready, so it means it can attack already when you play it. And then this supposedly the downside would be that in the end of the when you ready your cards, you either have to pay 1 or return this card to the hand. But the thing is, sometimes this encourages our opponent from using cards like Traitors, where they will be able to steal your unit, okay, but now they will be having to pay 1 resource every turn, and this sometimes can stop them from keeping up with the tempo of our deck. And they might not want to deal damage to this as well, because if they only deal, for example, 2 or 3 damage, and we think it might like risk getting an overwhelmed barrage, where they can like easily deal 1 damage to this and to other units, we can opt to just return this to our hand, and then we basically play it again, and we basically paid 2 mana to heal our unit. So really good to keep our presence in space, and an amazing card overall. Then we have Red 3. Basically this is a buff to our board. It's a 3 mana 3/3 technically. When it defends, it's just a 2/3, which is not really the best stats in space, since most like relevant units have 3 attack. But this card, like in some situations, this card can just like push a lot of damage, especially if we had Swarm during the early game. And yeah, this card just presents a lot of damage that the opponent has to deal with this, otherwise this card will slowly win you the game. Then we have Wing Leader. It's our most risky card, but it's a very good card, like to make sure our board sticks. Most of our units are rebels, including our leader, so we can use this to make sure our leader is able to defeat a sentinel or just keep pushing damage every turn, and makes it very hard to deal with. You can also use it as on your second turn when you have 3 resources to buff like an A-wing or an X-wing and just like attack with a huge 4 or 5 damage in your first attack, which is amazing. Then we have Aussie Liberator Gunship. I'm still debating on this card. I'm not really sure about it. It's good in some situations, especially when our opponent is also playing a space heavy deck, but it is basically one of the 2 cards with ambush that come out in the early game in space, and like it works if you want to, if our opponent like spent resources trying to take the space away from us, and this can just like single-handedly win the space back for us. Next we have Heroic Sacrifice. It's basically a finisher card if you're digging for more finishers and you have a unit that will probably already die anyway. This is good to force some trades against sentinels if your opponent is trying to block our way to the base. But mostly just a finisher. It's not a really good card tempo wise, but it works. So it also works really well if you have a K2SO already on board. So if they don't have a sentinel, this plus K2SO can present 9 damage to the base, or you can just use this to attack over a sentinel. The overwhelm will get some damage through, and then when K2SO dies, it deals another 3 damage to your opponent. So really good cards, but a bit situational. Another somewhat situational card is Sneak Attack. I think that this is one of the reasons why you play Sabine Yellow over Sabine Green, for example. This basically lets us play a unit for 1 less cost, but it will come and play ready, so it can attack straight away. The downside is that at the end of the turn it gets defeated, but in some cases that downside can be mitigated, most in the K2SO case, where the downside actually becomes an upside, where you can play K2SO, attack base for 4, and then at the end of the turn it dies, dealing another 3 damage to the base. Another use case for Sneak Attack is Fleet Lieutenant, where you can use Sneak Attack, play Fleet Lieutenant ready, and use Fleet Lieutenant's ability on himself to attack straight away for 5 damage to the base. This basically presents us more finishing opportunities in the deck. Surprise Strike is also one of our main finishers. It's basically you pay 2 resources to deal attack with a unit, and that attack will do 3 more damage. So it's basically dealing 3 damage for 2 resources, which is an acceptable rate. Sometimes, most of the time actually, this is like a really good card, but sometimes it's not really helping you establish a board, so you'd rather establish a board first and then try to use your finishers like Surprise Strike and the next card for a cause, Heroic Sacrifice, after you already have a board established. Since you're playing mostly in space, it will be hard for your opponent to interact with everything you play, and you play a lot of low cost units, so yeah, that's the strength of this deck. Then our next finisher, For a Cause I Believe In. This doubles not only as a finisher, but also as a way to ensure we have good plays in our next turn, or a way to dig our deck for more finishers if we need them. So yeah, this can give our opponents information of what we're gonna play next turn, but having the possibility to basically surveil 4 is really good, especially in an aggro deck where those kinds of effects aren't really common compared to other card games. Then for our sideboard, I was planning mostly on running cards that stop cards that basically win the game against us. So I run Bamboozle to stop stuff like Dark Saber, or like if our opponent's playing a very upgrade heavy deck. You can also use this to counter Traitoros, which is one of the main cards that I think can give our opponent an edge over us. But usually you'd rather deal with Traitoros in another way, which we'll get in soon. Next we have Spark of Rebellion. I don't use this very much, it's mostly here for combo and control decks. Decks like Hand Green, or control decks like Palpatine, where they're looking to play a really good card that just gives them a huge tempo swing. This can let us disrupt those kinds of play. Next we have this Anything Fighter. This is our main out to Traitoros, but can also help against decks like, for example, Boba Fett, where they give the Boba armor to an unit. This can overall, if your opponent deck is playing upgrades, this card can be a huge tempo swing and like deals with a lot of upgrades are relevant in this current meta. So this is a card that usually will become useful. And we have two Spare the Targets. This is mostly to do with Sentinels, and in some cases can be useful in the mirror. For example, if you go second and your opponent plays, for example, a Green Squadron A-Wing, or if they're playing Sabine Green, they play a Battlefield Marine and follow up with a Wing Leader. Using Spare the Target can bounce that unit back to hand and let us be ahead in the race. So this card can be useful in a lot of matchups, but in some cases, especially when we're trying to be the more aggressive player on the match, this is not that useful. But even in those situations, this can be used to deal with Sentinels. So yeah, this is the deck I've been testing a lot, and I'm still making some changes. For example, I'm trying to play without Alzituk, trying to run more of these, maybe another R2. I'm still considering some other cards, but mostly I think this is the version that I've been playing in tournaments, and this is the version that I've been able to like get second place at some local big local tournaments, get first place at a lot of local like regular weekly tournaments here. And yeah, this version is I think this provides a really good base if you want to play Sabine Yellow. And yeah, I think there's a lot of testing to be done with this deck. I don't think it's solved yet. So yeah, if you like this video, let me know in the comments. You can like and subscribe. I should be posting more videos about Star Wars Unlimited and maybe some other card games in the future. And I think that's it. Bye bye.